Hi, Stuart. Thanks for joining me.
Not a problem. Nice to be here.
Nice to meet you. Right, okay, let's just start with, tell me what you do and how long you've been doing it.
So I am actually a building services engineer, a consultant. So what I do is primarily design work for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems that go into anything from a normal house to a skyscraper or an airport or a hospital, or it could be an apartment block or it could be a warehouse, anything really.
Okay.
What we do as a group of people, as a company, is that's our bread and butter. We design, but we also do a lot of sustainability work as well. So we are heavily focused on the sort of net zero, low carbon agenda that the Mayor of London has set, that the G10 or 20, whatever the G number is for the countries, for the 2050 net zero as well. So yeah, that's what we do. Yeah.
And how long has the business been running?
So our business has been running now for just over about 5.5 years.
Okay. And you've been there all the way through, have you?
Yeah. Okay. So for the company we are now, we were originally founded by myself and a co-director, who worked together at a previous company in London. And when unfortunately there were a few issues which meant that company no longer traded, we made the decision that let's try it ourselves rather than just go looking for another job. And yeah, it's been a great success, to be honest. And
brilliant.
We this year, earlier in the year, we well, I say earlier, not too earlier, it's been a bit more recent, but we've actually merged our company with a similar sized company of the same age and same size, same everything financially as well. So we've actually created ourselves a much bigger company organically without having to sell or to take on any sort of investment from an outside hedge fund or something like that. So we've managed to all parties involved have still retained their full control, the full power, shareholding and everything without having to answer to some foreign investment fund and hit targets every month. So
fantastic. So both companies there have had to navigate through the last few years. What challenges did you find through the pandemic?
So for us, we were quite fortunate that we had a very good order book. So we were in a great position that we didn't have to furlough any staff, even though I'm a very jealous of a few people because it seems like it was a nice holiday, but we didn't have to furlough anybody. We were pretty flat out working, both of us. We had commitments, we had work to deliver. We rely on our staff as well. They're an important part of what we do, so they were needed. Our guests say the sort of the difficulties we came up against, obviously straight away, is going from the being face to face and being close to each other to suddenly being remote. The fact that the technology is there to do it, Zoom, Microsoft Teams and stuff is fantastic. But as part of our job is to be, in person on site to inspect or to survey or whatever. It's part of our role, and it's an important part of any construction project to make sure things are being done properly or the safety is being met, things like that. And obviously at the start of the pandemic, building sites was closed down, so we couldn't do that. And also the type of job that we've got where we're all different, so we all work in different disciplines. Everyone's got a sort of specialist role that they do, but we're all required to coordinate with one another, and we're all required to sort of, it's very organic and cyclical. We don't just work in isolation in our own little silos. What one person does affects another. So having that sort of across the desk sort of camaraderie and back and forth discussion, we did miss that. Granted, you can pick up your teams, you can call somebody, but there's nothing that beats shouting across a desk and saying, oh, by the way, what do I do about this? And it's answered within 5 minutes. And I guess one thing I did find as well was when we were meeting in person or going to site or any general meeting with other parties such as architects were in person, they were carefully selected. They weren't booked for the sake of booking a meeting because they knew people had to travel, people needed to get somewhere, whether it was in London or outside of London. But with the advent of remote calling, the frequency of meetings did increase, because I think people thought actually it's a lot easier to do. So rather than having a meeting where you might have an hour either side to travel and grab a sandwich or something, you were finding that it was almost death by teams. You had meeting upon meeting upon meeting. So yeah, that was the sort of the one thing that really affected us. And I think, to be fair, whether it's the pandemic or a mix of that and Brexit, we're really suffering in our industry from a terrible skill shortage. So there's a real shortage of people out there to fulfill what construction needs. And we've got not just us alone, but across the industry, there's a serious, there's a housing shortage, right? That's broadcast by the news and the government daily. We just don't have the people in this country anymore to do it. And yeah, you could blame the Brexit, you could blame the pandemic. It's probably a mix of all things, really.
Yeah, I'm hearing that in a lot of industries that are being affected by that as well.
Yeah, but on the flip side, obviously, with Teams calling and things like that, your associates don't necessarily need to be based in the same place where you are because of this function. They could be based in Scotland or offshore somewhere, and as long as they've got internet, they're contactable. So.
And are you getting back into the office now then? Are you getting back to that sort of across the desk?
Yeah, so we kind of, as soon as the government allowed it, to be fair, we started going back in one, maybe up to 2 days a week.
Yeah.
Into the London office, and we've maintained that. So we're still only going in, really. We have 2 fixed days for going in for just everybody's in together. So we take in a big advantage of getting everyone together. Yeah. Obviously, we have got other things where we may have to go in for meetings or client visits or something like that. So that could be 2, could be 3 days, but we haven't enforced a rule of you must come in for 5 days. It's still very flexible, because we appreciate as well people have got lives, and it's really difficult now with inflation. The NHS is having a real problem. People have got doctor's appointments or dentist appointments, and now that we're waiting, we could be waiting 6 months to get one.
Yeah, we've got to be
we don't want to miss it. We've got to be flexible with our people to allow them to, if it comes up on an office day, then so be it. Your health is really important. But for me personally, I tend to go into London maybe 2-3 days a week. I equally go to the Cambridge office maybe 1 or 2 days a week, because luckily from where I live, I can get to London really quick, and I can drive to Cambridge really quick. So it works quite well for me. So I generally only work from home 1 day a week now, if at all.
So thinking back in your career, have you had one inspiring leader that stood out for you in that time?
I've had a few, and both are very different things. But I guess when it's more about, for me, it wasn't necessarily about leadership. It was more about encouragement. So as a, when you're a younger engineer, and I used to work on the tools. So before I started in building service engineering, I actually went through an advanced apprenticeship to become a mechanical services engineer doing plumbing and heating. So I did my apprenticeship that way before doing my university degree. So I've had people sort of mentor me from various different angles, and each one's obviously benefited me in a different way. And I think they're all quite important and critical to that path that I've been on. But I guess for me it was more, there's been quite a few, and a few in particular who have, as a younger engineer, have given me opportunities that you may not have got elsewhere at a younger age. They may have kept you in your box, let's call it, whereas they haven't. They've kind of loosened my reins a little bit and said, go for it. And fortunately I've took the opportunities where I can, and because of that encouragement.
Yeah. And has that led on into the way that you lead and manage people now?
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned for me from various people that I've worked for. And I wouldn't also say that everything I've learned is good. There's obviously, I've learned from people's mistakes as well. Yeah. So, I wouldn't really want to treat any of our staff or team the way I wouldn't myself want to be treated, because I've been employed. I know what it's like. It can be frustrating sometimes when you don't know everything, and that's not what not what we encourage. We want people to feel like they're not just an employee, but they're part of the growth of what we're doing. They've got ideas, bring it to us. You are the face as well as we are.
Brilliant. So I know we talked about COVID and the pandemic, but apart from that, since you started your business, what do you think has been one of the biggest issues you've had to overcome?
It's a really tricky question. The tax man. That's not an issue. Everyone's got to pay him. No, it's just quite. I think it can be a perception thing sometimes, in that when you don't have your own business, and you just, before you get to that point, you kind of have these sort of, you view business owners, I think, or I definitely did, through sort of a rose tinted glasses, that wow, these guys are invincible. They've got a business, they're making a lot of money. It's a great, they can run their own diaries, they don't answer to anybody. Well, actually, it was quite a harsh slap in the face becoming a business owner, when you realize actually you might not be answering to someone directly above you, but you actually are answerable to yourself, which actually I'm probably harder with myself than I am with anybody else. But you're also answerable to your clients as well, because they're the people who pay your bills. And if you upset them and you've got no income, then you've got no business. And obviously, there's a lot of cost associated with running a company. You've got taxes, you've got bills, you've got VAT. And I think it's only when you become a business owner you realize that all these things come into play, and obviously the legal sort of things you agree to, just by becoming a director as well. So it was a bit of a very new thing for me, but
an eye opener.
But there's also, there is the great benefit of, we're not restricted by somebody else's vision. We've got our vision now, what we want to bring to the world, and it's great to be part of that journey, really.
Yeah, and it sounds, you've just merged with another business, so you go, you grow in, and you're moving up, which is brilliant. So what I'm going to ask you about now is thinking about the world today, your industry. What is inspiring to you? I know you talked about the sustainable side of it, but what would you say is inspiring you today?
So for me, I guess you got to look at the way I kind of view my job anyway. So for me, it's not, I don't see it as a job of what I've got. So I don't have a job. For me, it's a lifestyle. I don't see it that I start work at 9, I finish at 5. I know I'm not there yet, but at this present moment in time in my life, I don't really have a target for retirement. I enjoy what I do because it's different. Every day is different. I'm not just stuck in a cube doing the same thing every day. I could be working in London one week, I could be in the USA the next, I could be in the Middle East or Europe, or I could be in another part of the United Kingdom. So I like that. It's a big part of my lifestyle. The inspiration, I don't know. I think because I enjoy what I do, I just enjoy the process. There are a lot of things in the industry that I prefer, or is probably my passion more than others. So we do have, so what I focus on as my specialism where we are is modern methods of construction. So this is where, houses or hotels or any sort of building, are built in an offsite environment in a factory. And then delivered to site and sort of literally put in like Lego when it's done right. So that's the sort of sector that I lead for the firm and really get passionate about, because it's, we like, in this country, we like to say it's a new sector. It really isn't. It's been around since,
Is it like the Huff houses?
A little bit similar. A lot of people think that it's, back in the post World War II, all these prefab houses with the tin roofs, it's a little bit more sort of sophisticated than that. But it's effectively, it's building them in a factory where it's, it's warm, it's dry. There's no, inclement weather delaying things. It's a lot safer because you're working at ground level, and rather than higher up a ladder on 2 stories or 3.
Yeah.
There's less wastage because obviously you do what you need to do, and it reduces, the amount of transport to a site because all the trade is in the factory or most of it, which obviously can, it's like if a new housing development gets built near where you live, trucks and cement trucks, and it gets mucky and people complain about the noise and the work and the hundreds of cars parking up. So, it's another way. It's not I wouldn't say it's going to take over 100% of the way buildings are built, but it's definitely got a place alongside traditional building in the future, especially if we're going to
You
hit
see
these.
that growing, do you? That's sort of like
Yeah, well, it has
trend.
to. It
Yeah.
needs to, because we've got these
Yeah.
targets, to build and net zero targets, and it's one of the only ways to achieve these targets that have been set, because we're all talking about the buzzword of carbon these days, and
hmm
concrete and steel are probably 2 of the worst offenders when it comes to carbon.
Yeah.
It's not anybody's fault. It's just the way that it's made. Whereas if we can use, really sustainable forms of timber, or call it CLT, things like that, and build our buildings that way, we're using natural resources that the earth's given us. There is a process to make it. Yes, I get that, but it's a hell of a lot more sustainable than mixing thousands of cubic meters of concrete.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so just looking to the future now, what do you see as your major challenges going forward?
I think for us and for any business, the global stage of politics is a real big factor now in what we do. And back in the day, whenever the day was, I can remember being, you didn't really care what president was elected in the US. You weren't really affected by a war that might have been at the other side of Europe. But because I think the world's a smaller place now because of travel and digital and things like that, we are directly affected by who's put into power in the US. We are directly affected by the war in Ukraine and things like that, because it has a knock-on effect on the cost of materials. It has a knock-on effect. Brexit has an effect. So again, another political decision which affects pretty much everybody. And I think our biggest challenge is now, following the post-pandemic, is going to be whether we do have another recession, or whether we talk ourselves into another recession. Is equally, is there really a recession, or are we talking ourselves into it? And it's the I think it's the economic climate is our biggest risk, is our biggest sort of challenge going forward. It's a risk to anybody, but it's the challenge that we've all got to overcome. And whether that's how you run your business, or you streamline it, or a different business model completely, obviously that's for everybody to decide for themselves, really.
Thank you. So just one last question. So what would you recommend to a young person starting their first business in the world today?
Just don't be afraid to do it. It can be daunting because, it's maybe on day one, it's not, everybody has their goal. People want to buy houses, they've got bills to pay. And sometimes the safety of a job, the safety net can be, the comforting factor. I'm going to get paid, I'm going to be able to maintain my bills. But there is, a great, we are a country that encourages people to be entrepreneurial and run businesses. And I would dare say just go for it, because even if it doesn't work out, it's not a failure. It's just another step in the learning process. And what you learn from that, what might not have worked out, you can take into the next one. And equally, it's not always your fault. There are outside external factors. So yeah, just, what, we live once, just why not go for it and see where it can take you, really.
Great advice.
I think for me, I'm trying to remember how old I was when so I'm 29, I think, when we start, or 28 or 29, when we started the business. And you almost have, I think, at a younger age, and I don't know if this is what people are brought up to feel, but you almost have this imposter syndrome where you think, am I old enough to run a business? Am I old enough to be employing people older than me, and not telling them, but asking them to do something? And I think you've got to take that out of the equation a little bit, because younger people sometimes have the better ideas. They're the ones who are a lot closer to the new things. We employ people now, I mean, I'm 34. I still like to think I know my way around an iPhone.
Yeah.
But we've got people in our office who are younger than me and just blow me away with their technological knowledge on,
Yeah.
computers, iPhones, and what's available. And it makes me think, Christ, maybe I am getting a bit older, because back in the day I was showing my dad or granddad how to use a phone, and now I'm being shown myself, and
Yeah.
so,
Well, you know what? It's making sure you've got people like that coming through, isn't it? Because,
yeah,
like you say, if they've got the latest knowledge and experiences.
I think it all stems from education, because I think we need to encourage more people that you don't necessarily need to have to go to university to be successful.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's currently ingrained in the way
Yeah.
this country pushes people through school and college, and university is the only way to be successful, when it really isn't.
Yeah.
Some people who are entrepreneurial might not be academic, but they could, be a superb business mind. So it's just not being afraid is and we need to support
Looking
them.
at vocational
Yeah.
training and learning and things like that. Yeah,
But we
totally.
could talk about that for a whole nother hour, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, maybe we will. But that's it for now, though. Thank you, Stuart. I really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, that's the end of the interview. Thank you.